Get rid of your credit card debt, get a lower monthly payment, and skip your next 2 house payments at SaveWithConrad.com. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to save thousands with SaveWithConrad.com. Find out how much money you can save right now at SaveWithConrad.com.
Hello, wrestling friends. I'm Matt Kuhn, which means you're listening to Wrestling Friends with Matt Kuhn. Again, I can title a show. Guys, we are off to a good start. Every single show, from second show to third show to fourth show to this show, I'm hoping this show is improving as far as lots of ideas of what I'm going to do here. And of course, the downloads are going up. And I think we're hitting on a little something here. Something a little bit different. Of course, last week we had the great Kate with Fightful. Man, she gave a awesome perspective on being a female wrestling fan, on women's wrestling, and also just wrestling in general. She gives me a pretty hard time about stuff on Twitter. I give her kind of a hard time on stuff on Twitter as well. She is just a little bright spot in the world of wrestling commentating and wrestling news. And I notice, a lot of the bright spots come from Fightful. Sean Ross Sapp has assembled a team of people that, I meet them and I genuinely like them. They're generally good people, and I have a good time talking to every one of them when I see them. And Kate, of course, was great on the show. Hopefully we'll have Kate back on. This week, we have Raj Giri. Raj is someone, I got to tell you, if it weren't for Raj, I probably wouldn't be doing this. So if you hate me, then you can thank Raj. I had left wrestling podcasting for a while. I just decided I didn't want to do it anymore. I go back and forth, I have a business that takes up a lot of my time, especially in the summer and, year round as well. We have teachers and students and sometimes I'm just not feeling it, and I wasn't. And then I did a comedy podcast with Corey Ryan Forster, our previous guest. And then I kind of just stopped because, honestly, health, I had a spinal tumor, and maybe I talk about it a lot, or maybe I don't talk about it at all, but it's one of these things the doctor's after telling me there's nothing wrong with me, right, says, Mr. Kuhn, you have a spinal tumor. You need to go to the emergency room. And so I had a spinal tumor, and when I say spinal tumor, not cancer, but enough where as a musician, it was affecting me, and just my day-to-day life, it affected me. And so during the time of the podcast with Corey is when I really just kind of diminished, and then I had the surgery, and the surgery was like, I don't want to get into the whole thing here, but it was like 4 vertebrae that got broken and then fused back together because the tumor was inside my spinal cord cavity, I guess you call it, was taking up all the room in there, pressing against the side. And, it makes it difficult now to kind of play music. And also the surgery itself makes it very difficult to not be in pain. Every day at some point is painful, and usually towards the end of the day, for instance, right now. But in doing that, I just kind of left podcasting altogether. And then something happened that I'm not quite ready to talk about yet with a friend of mine who turned out not to be a friend. So I just stopped doing everything. I didn't want to do anything. And Raj and I started talking on Twitter about Peacemaker and TV shows and all this stuff. He's like, man, come on, Wrestling 8. Talk about wrestling and Peacemaker. I'm like, all right, cool. I started doing that. And then I guess I was back, just started doing wrestling once in a while. Raj is someone I really like, really respect. We're like-minded in a lot of ways. And, just to follow the story from there, I was, offered William Regal's podcast and did the absolute best I could with that. And I think people liked it. And when that ended, I already had Dax. Dax and I had talked probably, my goodness, like 5 months before it debuted. Like, we already agreed to do it 5 months before it debuted. But without Raj, none of that happens. What a fascinating origin story that is. I know. Maybe I should call myself the least interesting person in all of podcasting. I think we'll maybe do this. I'm not sure. As you know, the podcast is out on Thursday. It's usually out on Wednesdays, but I want to do Thursday because of the special announcement of All Elite Wrestling that CM Punk is coming back. And I want to talk about that CM Punk announcement, the confirmation. I think a lot of us knew it at the end of the show. But I'm going to do the review of All Elite Wrestling Dynamite. I'm going to talk about Double or Nothing and just the torrent of feedback I got to me saying not only was it not a good show, but that AEW was in trouble. And the thing that I think upset the most people is I said that many All Elite Wrestling fans need to stop pretending it's good when it's not. Because it doesn't do All Elite Wrestling any favors. And so I'm going to explain what I meant by that, talk about the pushback on that, how fascinating all that is. We'll try to make it as interesting as you can, mostly by modulating my voice in different ways, because that's pretty much all I got. We're going to talk about Dynamite real quickly, and then we're going to talk about the kind of controversy out of Double or Nothing. The first match for Dynamite was Lucha Brothers and Bandito versus the Blackpool Combat Club. This is a follow-up to the 8-man match that took place at Double or Nothing. The Blackpool Combat Club, in this case, comprised of Wheeler Yuta, Claudio Castagnoli, and Jon Moxley. It was a good match. It was a great way to start. Not sure it's the best use of the Blackpool Combat Club. And I know people like the Blackpool Combat Club. I think they're more effective separately, especially with Bryan Danielson. But again, these 6 guys killed it. You get Bandito in there. He does his thing where he's strong. You get the Lucha Brothers in there. They do all their crazy flips, and Cieto Meadow and Phoenix is insane. A good match, and kind of the random pairings that we've seen on Dynamite that we're kind of used to, We had an angle came up. Jay White and Juice Robinson of the Bullet Club come to the ring and talk to Tony Schiavone, and start talking crap about FTR because FTR comforted Ricky Starks, which is not the strongest of motivations for a feud. And then Dax and Cash came out, and Juice hit Dax with a roll of quarters. So old school. Dax probably loved that. And he went down, and then there was the attack from Jay White and Juice Robinson on FTR, and that's the matchup, right? That's what FTR is doing next. It was good. It was good, and I'm glad. I don't understand the motivation 100%, but I'm always glad to see Dax and Cash with a good dance partner. Jay White and Juice Robinson are going to be great dance partners. I wish they would have created the reason for it a little bit, but now this attack becomes the reason, and it's the strangest thing with FTR. It's like we talked a lot about how FTR had been cooled off by not being on television a lot, not wrestling a lot of matches. And then they didn't wrestle forever, right? Then they wrestled the Guns to get their titles back. Then they didn't wrestle forever. Then they wrestled on Double or Nothing. And here they are not wrestling again as a tag team. FTR was the hottest tag team, one of the hottest acts in all of wrestling. And what makes them hot is their matches and their tag team matches, not 6-man so much and not singles so much. I love seeing Dax in their singles, but I want to see them in tag team matches. I want to see all the hot guys getting hot. We had a 3-way, Trent against Swerve and Big Bill. Good stuff. Nice 3-way match. Not so random because it's 3 of the guys who were featured pretty well in the Battle Royal that took place at Double or Nothing. It's a great Battle Royal, and the way that it was won by Orange Cassidy was amazing. Swerve Strickland won the match. Man, Swerve is showing what everybody like myself have talked about for a long time, which is, he is a star. He's a guy that maybe could be a world champion one day. He's a guy that has kind of everything they're looking for. Back in the day, he might have been too small to wrestle, but he's every bit as big as MJF physically. When you talk about compelling people to like or dislike you on the microphone, he's there. When you talk about compelling people to like or dislike you in the ring, he's there. He's impressive in the ring. So Swerve Strickland is the man. Loving what he's doing. Hopefully they don't cool him off again. Every time he gets out there, he gets cooled off. He goes and does well and then disappears. Next segment was Don Callis and Takeshita. Takeshita and Don Callis come out, and Don Callis does a big promo on Takeshita, who had turned heel against the Elite dastardly, and he came off really well. Like, Takeshita looked cool as hell, just like in his black, and trying to look evil, like just mean mugging us the whole time, while Callis is talking about that he's better than so and so and so and so. He said he's better than Okada, and he was like, ooh, better than Okada. A great segment, good follow up to the betrayal that happened at Double or Nothing. We had a peculiar tag team match. We had the Gates of Agony versus Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin. This is one of those matches where it would have been, and there's a couple in this like that too, where it's better served by not announcing ahead of time. I think one of the weaknesses in All Elite Wrestling is the fact that they announce every single match. It's well-intentioned. Like, for WWE, we've had it for years, where, like, we don't know what the hell's going on. Teddy Long comes out, let's make a match, and then we have matches, or someone gets in the ring and demands a match, and there's a match. And I understand Tony Khan not liking that way, but you don't just have 2 points. Like, there's several different ways you can do it. There's a million points in between those two extremes, and we could possibly look at one of those, because when you announce matches, think about it. If you announce matches, it's not going to draw anybody in who wasn't going to watch the show. When you announce all the matches, it's not going to draw anybody in. Nobody's going to say, ooh, so-and-so's wrestling, now I'm watching. The people who are going to watch are going to watch. But what it can do is push people away who might have watched and goes, I'm not really into that card. Oh, my favorite wrestler's not on. Leave some mystery, because this would have been a fun little mystery match. Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy defeat the Gates of Agony. Gates of Agony looked pretty good to me. And I think they're figuring out, I don't know what they're doing with Darby. Orange Cassidy looks to be wrestling Swerve next week. We had Chris Statlander, who is a big reason why the pay-per-view turned around Sunday from terrible to okay. And she was great. And she defended against Nyla Rose. This is a perfect example of maybe not announcing the matches ahead of time, because Nyla's great, right? Nyla hasn't been around a while. Nyla's got some credibility, has some history with the titles. And, you say Chris Statlander's got a defense. Who's she going to defend against? Nyla comes out. People are like, oh, my God, what a test. Oh, my goodness, it's Nyla. But when you announce it ahead of time, you get too much time to think about it, right? You go, well, that'd be okay, or, and it was a fine match, Saraya versus Chris Jericho versus Adam Cole and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. This was much better than the Chris Jericho Adam Cole match at Double or Nothing. I think Saraya and Chris Jericho, they look great on screen together, and I think they should be together like all the time. That should be the pair. They look fantastic. I would have them, man, and just mostly on the microphone, but just the way they look together. And also, I think they just have a lot of chemistry. Chris Jericho has a lot of chemistry with Britt Baker in the ring as well. There were some moments with those two that people flipped out for. This was something I wasn't necessarily looking forward to, but I thought it was good. And with Cole and Baker winning, hopefully it ends this story, which hasn't done a whole lot of good for anybody. But if they're going to continue it, I suggest this. Britt Baker versus Chris Jericho, hair versus hair. Let's do it. It's time. And a fun intergender match like that, who'd be better representatives? Who would be? Nobody I can think of. And that's your good faith AEW Dynamite review. Now, speaking of good faith All Elite Wrestling review, I put on Twitter a couple tweets that pissed people off. One was, I said, Raj is going to be on the show. Is it okay to criticize All Elite Wrestling? And I'm going to follow up with that after the Raj interview, as well as talking about CM Punk talk coming up right after the interview. But before that, I'm going to talk about this notion of Double or Nothing, whether it's good or not, and the thing I said on Twitter that people, and if you're not on Twitter, I'm sorry, but just bear with me. There's a whole world out there that you don't know of and you don't need to know of, but it's interesting to hear about, because you get a kind of, a little glimpse into the wrestling fanship. And a lot of times with the All Elite Wrestling fans, the diehards, not the good fans, not like my friend Andy. Andy Nemedy's a great fan of All Elite Wrestling and loves all of it and does so legitimately and sincerely. And there are lots of people like that. But I put out a tweet that said AEW fans would do AEW a lot of favors to not pretend that Double or Nothing wasn't a disaster. You know, it helps All Elite Wrestling to do so. And people really objected to that. First of all, they objected to my term pretending. And so what I'm talking about, I allude to with Raj's interview. And it is true. I'm going to say it because, you know, it's not like Tony Khan and All Elite Wrestling could like dislike me anymore. Like, you know, like, or that I'm getting a job there or whatever. Like, or, you know, I don't have anything to lose is what I'm saying. But in not having anything to lose, I'm going to be myself. I'm not going to turn into this guy that bashes All Elite Wrestling all the time because I truly want it to succeed. I believe in it. I like many of the wrestlers in there, and I believe in the mission 100%. So when I say pretending, here's what I mean. First of all, there was a group of fans that were in their heads kind of deluding themselves, and it was showed when they responded to the tweet. They go, this pay-per-view wasn't bad, but it was like the second worst one. I'm like, bro, that's what bad means. Someone else said, All Elite Wrestling has all good pay-per-views. This one was just okay. So you're saying it's the worst one. That's what bad means. And also, I was talking about the build-up and the fact that, you know, All Elite Wrestling did not sell out the MGM Grand or where I think T-Mobile or whatever it's named these days. The place in Las Vegas that was sold out to the max when I went there to see Double or Nothing. And also, the ratings have gone down not just a little bit, but pretty significantly year to year, like 100,000 year to year. That's not something that should be ignored, and there's reasons for it. So there is that aspect of fan that is pretending it's good and doesn't want to be critical because they love it. And I can't really fault that, right? But what I do fault is a lot of people out there who, behind closed doors, talk a lot about All Elite Wrestling and Tony Khan and the struggles it has and all that they're doing wrong and that they're in trouble and that this pay-per-view was a disaster and they need to turn things around and, oh my God, the Four Pillars is an indicator of this and the Elite aren't popping ratings and all this stuff and, oh my God, they're cooling off all these hot acts. Look what's going on with FTR. People are saying that all the time, privately. But publicly, they're not. Now, I thought, in my stupidity, it could be me. I'll say it publicly. I'll do it. I'll say it publicly. I'll say, hey man, I want All Elite Wrestling to be great, but there's a lot of changes that need to take place. Like, if you're down year to year this much, and your attendance is down year to year this much, you know, you might want to think about some stuff. And yeah, I know Wembley, and I love the fact that they did the Wembley, you know, but as Raj talks about later, it's got a lot to do with some other factors. It's not diminishing it at all or devalidating it at all. And in no point does it devalidate this idea that AEW is successful. Because I've never been, nor would I ever be that guy to say All Elite Wrestling is not successful. It's been, if it goes up business tomorrow, it's successful. It changed the wrestling business for the better in a lot of ways. But it could be, I don't even say it's going to be better, because I don't really come from a perspective of, I want wrestling to be the way I like it. I'm not that guy. Like wrestling, to me, was this magical thing that I enjoy still, and I enjoy a lot of the shenanigans that take place behind the stage and the stories, and I love it when it's great. But the kind of wrestling I like doesn't have to be the wrestling that's, you know, on All Elite Wrestling. It doesn't have to be, you know, at all. What it does have to be is successful. It has to grow. It has to keep growing because it can grow. Because WWE is a monolith, and when they get a chance, they're going to try to squeeze it out. And when you have Collision coming up, you have Wembley coming up, you have the most crucial summer, even more than 2021, the most crucial summer of All Elite Wrestling, because it's either going to expand, highlight, and really put a microscope on the issues they have, or it's going to be a platform for them to get to the next level. CM Punk coming back, Collision, all this stuff going on. It's a crucial time, and now's the time. If you're thinking about, if you've ever heard of strategic planning, I got into strategic planning for the boys. It's hard to say. Strategic planning. I was a unit director for the Boys and Girls Clubs, and they picked 2 of us out of whatever, 30 of us to join the administration to do some strategic planning for the organization. And then I actually got to do a lot more of that because they liked my contributions, because I like to talk. But strategic planning, a lot of times, if you've ever read the book Good to Great, that's a good start. It's like, hey, what's not working? Let's make a list. What does the ideal look like, right? The ideal look, what does it look like? And what are the steps that we need to get there? What's the order of those steps? And what are the tactics and strategies we need to employ to get those steps? Right now, I'm not seeing any of that go on. What I'm seeing is just business as usual. And what I worry about, this thing that I loved, the thing that I really want to do well, is fading away, and people are not speaking up. Now, there's a couple reasons people aren't speaking up. Number one is the fans can be a little dicey. They can be a little combative, right? And the reason is because they've had people shitting on them forever, and also it's their thing, and they love it. But I think it's a combination of those things. So yeah, a lot of it is the fans, but also a lot of it's All Elite Wrestling. A lot of people feel that Tony Khan and some of the admin over at the old All Elite Wrestling have a tendency to be sensitive and have a tendency to shut out or maybe overreact to criticism. And so that makes a lot of people afraid to criticize. Like I said, I thought it was going to be me. Like, I'll do it. I'll take the bullet. It'll be me. And I don't mind doing it, because I do want All Elite Wrestling to be successful. And I think people who are in the industry, or people that are outside, almost in the industry, or people that are influential, need to stop kind of being afraid to speak out and just saying, oh, everything's great. What a great show. Oh my gosh, it was good. I thought it was good. Some people didn't like it, but it was okay. No, if you didn't like it, talk about why you didn't like it. If All Elite Wrestling is struggling, talk about it. Like, why aren't people really talking about these ticket sales and attendance? And I will tell you one other reason they're not too, and this is totally fair to All Elite Wrestling, because there's a lot of people who've been doing this shit from day one and look at any reason to shit on them, right? They look on any reason to say, oh, well, they can't sell out this, or, oh, what happened to this show, or, oh, and they're just hating, right? And I understand being tired of that, but the people at All Elite Wrestling need to be able to discern the difference, and also be able to say, okay, this is a valid criticism. And also, more importantly, look at the writing on the wall and say, oh man, the ratings have gone down. I wonder why. Let me hear what some people have to say. Not necessarily me. I'm the least person you should listen to. I'm a wrestling fan with a podcast who runs a music school. But there's a lot of people with a lot more knowledge than I have who could be brought in or talked to, and I'm not like the guy who's like, bring people in and get rid of those people. I'm not that guy. But I am saying that wrestling fans, All Elite Wrestling fans, whether you're just a fan or whether you're more, should stop pretending that things are good when they're not, because it doesn't do All Elite Wrestling any favors. And that, my friends, is what I tweeted. Yeah, that was a bit long, but I hope you understood what I was saying, and I hope it was entertaining to you. If you have any feedback, you can tweet me at Matt Coon Music over on the old Twitter. And Raj Giri, of course, coming up. Before we talk about that, we know, of course, that summer is coming up. And are you ready to unveil your beach bod? Now, me, that thing will probably never, ever happen. But, you know, there are things you want to tighten up, right? And Manscaped is here to ensure your body is ready for the wild with their game-changing full-body grooming and hygiene products. You know, and this is true, like the guy at the beach with Austin Powers' chest hair, you know, and they actually wrote this. And if you grew some Winterman tits, they wrote that. The least you can do is make sure they're hairless. or well-groomed. That's interesting copy, Manscaped. It's time to get ready for Hot Guy Summer for going to Manscaped for 20% off and free shipping with the code WF20. Now, of course, you know that Manscaped is dedicated to helping you kind of be more confident by looking all tightened up down there. And they kind of became they are the absolute industry leader in that area. You know, if you haven't had the Essential Lawnmower 4.0, that comes in the Performance Package 4.0, it is standard for a man to be a man today. It's standard because it's got the Lawnmower 4.0, which is cordless body trimmer, and they got a bunch of other cool little, man, when I saw all the little things they gave you, all the little liquid formulations to run out your grooming routine they gave you, I couldn't believe it. You get the crop preserver, the ball deodorant, and the crop reviver ball toner, which is an anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizers. Because you ever had the chafing? You ever had it? You ever want a solution for it? Ladies, all the 3 ladies that listen, sorry about that, but it's a thing, you know, like the balls they get, they got a mind of their own sometimes. And if you get the crop reviver ball toner, it'll help out a lot. And of course, if you got nose hairs, come with the Weed Whacker 2.0. And they have the brand new beard hedger. You know, I would encourage you to get the beard hedger. If you're not a body hair guy like me, I got to trim up just a little bit. I don't have a lot of body hair, but I got enough that, you know, I think the Manscaped is standard for every man, but the beard hedger is the thing. Even if you have the world's worst beard like me, it can help you. And if you are wearing sandals like I always do, pretty much all the time, you need to get the Manscaped Shears 2.0 nail kit, because having the right tools for grooming is essential. Do yourself a favor and always use the right tools for the job. So get 20% off. Right now's the time. Number 1, you're a man and you need this stuff. You need the beard hedger. And dude, that comes with a bunch of cool stuff too. Like I use all that stuff, like the little brush and the little comb and the balm and the moisturizer and the conditioner, and there's all, and the little scissors. Like I use it all. It's fantastic. But also, of course, the Performance Package 4.0, and do it because you need it, but also do it to help the podcast, because it helps us out a lot if you go to manscaped.com and use our code WF20 to get 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code WF20 at manscaped.com. Trim your chesticles with the besticles. That's not bad. At manscaped.com, code WF20. All right, wrestling friends, joining us this week, as I said earlier, he is the founder of WrestlingInc.com. And you'll still find him on there, on the podcasts and on the live streams, occasionally and somewhat frequently. He's definitely someone you should follow on Twitter at Raj Giri. He's always got a lot of good stuff to say, but most importantly, he's a wrestling friend. Welcome to Wrestling Friend, Raj. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you? I'm surprised you're not sick of me by now.
Oh, no, we had fun the other night. You know, Raj invited me gracefully to be on the AEW post show, and we've done a couple things together. Raj, last I heard, though, you had sold Wrestling Inc., and you were like, this is my last week. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm getting the feels about it. And then a few weeks later, you're like, hey, man, I'm going to be on. You want to come on, too? Are you still with Wrestling Inc.? Is that the deal?
So I'm still helping him out here and there. On my basically the last day where I was actually going to be gone, we kind of came up with a deal where I'd still do some of the podcasts. I'm doing the Thursday podcast with Jack Farmer, and then help out here and there as I can. Like I did this weekend, they were short staffed for the AEW pay-per-view and for Night of Champions. So I helped out with those podcasts, and I'm giving my feedback and things like that. So I'm definitely not back in my old role or anything. I'm not in charge or anything like that, but I'm still affiliated with them.
Well, Wrestling Inc. is an interesting thing. You sold it, I believe, last year. Is that when you sold it? Early?
Yeah, correct. It's been almost exactly a year and 1 month.
And you stayed on a year after you sold it just to kind of help it do what it did. So WrestlingInc.com, I know it was kind of one that competed with a lot of the, I guess, bulletin style or news site style websites at the time. The first I ever really heard of it was, you know, you scrolled down to the bottom of Pro Wrestling Torch, you'd see some ads for it. Can you tell us the story of WrestlingInc.com?
Yeah, it actually started out as just a hobby. I was a chemical engineering major at this engineering school out here called the Colorado School of Mines, and I just absolutely hated it. And one weekend, my then girlfriend, now wife, she was out of town, and I was like, instead of going out and partying this weekend, I'm just going to work on learning how to make a website. And so went to GeoCities, and that's how old I am. Yeah, that's how old I am.
The old Yahoo platform for people that didn't know how to make websites. We just went on there and used the template.
Yep, exactly. And so I went on there, I had just gotten re-interested in pro wrestling. I'd been following. I was a gigantic fan in the late 80s. 93 to 95, I was kind of falling off, and then Nitro started, and I got back into it. And so by 96, I was all the way back in and needed a topic for the website. So I was like, hey, I'll just blog what's now called blogging, but just put my thoughts on what's going on in wrestling and where I see things are going and go from there. And the first day I did that, I got like 8 hits, and that blew my mind that 8 people that don't know me just visited the site, and I was hooked. And it just went off from there. I would just post my thoughts, and wrestling was pretty predictable back then. So I'd post a lot of stuff that you could see coming, but, and I'd let people know this isn't inside information. I think, Sid is going to win the title here, or, stuff like that. And just started getting a following. And by 97, I was like, all right, this is an actual thing. And I got the wrestlinginc.com domain name.
And how did it turn into like where you're putting stories out there? I don't know if you've ever really labeled yourself a journalist, but it definitely was one of those things, like the old prowrestling.com website where you'd have little stories listed, but yours was a little different. You had pictures with it and kind of a different kind of look. And then eventually I think it got kind of I don't know how you feel about the term aggregator, but someone that, takes all the news and puts it in one place for wrestling fans to go to. How do those transitions take place?
Yeah, I've never referred to myself as a journalist. I've always been, whether entrepreneur, I don't know if that sounds a little hotty-totty. Yeah, exactly. But I've always been a business person, and I've always wanted to create a space for wrestling fans to go to that's fun. And, because pro wrestling at its core, it's supposed to be fun. I mean, there's some stuff that we watch that's absolutely absurd. I mean, there was times where we had a guy in a coffin, having sex with a corpse.
Yes.
So, I wanted to make a site that, when there's real stories, you take those seriously, but also when there's not real stories, you have fun with it.
Right.
And, and just something that people go to, have fun, get their mind off of things, just a really fun experience for wrestling fans. So part of that was creating the comment section. Before that, we had a message board, and just make it a place where you could get lost for a while and take your mind off of things.
And eventually became one of the leaders in traffic in pro wrestling. You definitely hit upon a formula. Other websites either got created or modified what they were doing to kind of mimic what you guys were doing. Do you see yourself as at Wrestling Inc. at the time as somewhat of an industry leader as far as how wrestling entertainment and wrestling news gets dispersed on the internet?
I definitely think so. Yeah. I mean, we're very different than, what the Observer was doing back then, or the Torch. And a lot of it was also a lot of content. So you listen to listening to an interview instead of posting the whole interview, you find something that's really interesting out of it, and that's an article.
And that's a headline, right? We see that all the time now. It's common now, but it wasn't then.
Right. Yeah. And always making sure to give credit to the people that did it. Also do our own interviews, do our own, for a while there, we were doing interviews daily. And I do think it's a formula that's definitely worked, that a lot of people have picked up on. And I think it's great.
Well, with Wrestling Inc., you have sold it, and now you're still doing the podcasting, and you're still doing the live streams and the YouTubing and all that. How has the transition been? Raj Giri wasn't necessarily a name, beyond the byline. until maybe just a couple years ago. What's it been like? And also on Twitter, you're, I guess you'd say outspoken, but you're just like saying normal things. What's it been like to transition, especially the last couple years, from like Raj Giri, the publisher, the entrepreneur, into, you know, kind of what I do a little bit, the public wrestling commenter dude?
Yeah, I always kind of wanted to stay behind the scenes. Even with things like interviews and things like that, I always wanted to have someone else do them, and I kind of oversee everything. And then I started doing the podcast with Vince Russo and Sean Ross Sapp, and it was kind of one of the things like me and Vince talked about was...
That's a squad. Right there.
Yeah. But, it was one of those things. I always thought, Vince was very responsible for Raw during the Attitude Era. So it might be fun to do a post-Raw recap with him. And I know he's got tons of nuclear heat, but, it's something worth trying out. And so...
I've been there.
Yeah. And so that was really when I started having my face on the site, but I really tried to avoid it up until then and really tried to have others do it and me just run things and stay behind the scenes. But then I started making, over the years, you make tons of contacts and sources and people that'll only talk to you and not talk to anyone else. So when it comes to like breaking news stories or things like that, I still, run with it under my name. But outside of that, I try to stay as behind the scenes as I can.
Well, it hasn't really worked lately, I got to be honest with you, because people love to take the things that you say and kind of really get angry about them. And we're going to talk a little bit, maybe a lot, about kind of good faith All Elite Wrestling critiques and its place in wrestling today. But before that, one thing that you've gotten a little attention for are your thoughts on CM Punk and about CM Punk's place in wrestling, his impact on All Elite Wrestling, whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. A lot of blowback to comments like that when I kind of thought they were well measured. I guess if you can explain to people what your thoughts are about CM Punk and his place in wrestling in 2023.
Yeah, I just think a lot of the coverage out there with CM Punk is like all one way or all the other. Actually, it's mostly all one way. Like it's all his fault. He brought it completely on himself, uninstigated. And it's not that simple. And I try to put some nuance on it. Like, yes, I do believe that Punk was out of line at that press conference. He made the company look really bad. He should definitely apologize for that. But with everything that happened behind the scenes, we don't know everything. But obviously, there are lines when you're doing promos that you know not to cross. You can't be an idiot. And I think
you can't sell
obviously
scores and promos,
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's real life, and a line was crossed. Ideally, with Punk and Hangman, ideally they should have worked that out behind the scenes, and it didn't happen. But it wasn't like Punk was uninstigated in the whole matter. And clearly there were other issues with the Elite. It's not all one way, and just trying to just bring that nuance to it and how people will just lose their minds when you try to do that. And that's just Twitter. I'm used to it. I got a thick skin, but yeah, I mean, Punk is the biggest draw that they have. And there are people on the other side that aren't willing to do business. And
which is insane if you think about it. Like, for me, I get tagged with the "he's a Punk guy" thing because I'm always defending him. What I'm defending is the coverage, and I'm defending the fairness. Mm-hmm. And just, I'm not like this giant CM Punk guy or this giant CM Punk fan, but just how it affected my podcast. I saw the most insane stuff. Like, just as anything that came out about Punk that was positive came out, something coincidentally would come out that was very negative from usually the same sources. You kind of alluded that earlier, that a lot of it comes from one side. I don't think like the Meltzers and Alvarez's of the world are sitting there going, "Ooh, I hate that CM Punk. I want to really screw him over." I don't think that's really the situation, but it might be a situation where there is a bias and that some people might be too arrogant to believe they can have a bias. I guess that's my viewpoint. What's your viewpoint on the what some might say is somewhat slanted coverage of CM Punk?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you 100%. I don't think they're doing it on purpose. I don't think they're trying to purposely not get him rehired or fired or anything like that. But I do think they, they have their viewpoint, and I think sometimes a lot of it will come out as fact as opposed to their viewpoint.
Right.
And that can be an issue at times, I think.
And also what people deem as important or unimportant to come out. Like there might be several things about, for instance, the Elite that don't come out because they might not think it's important. But all these little details about how Punk is this terrible person come out. What you said is nuance, that you said, hey, there's ways to look at this that isn't one way or the other. How much, as far as Punk goes, how much pushback did you get? And did you get it from both sides on that? Because we find that when I try to go, hey, guys, there's more than one story, or there's more than one story here. It's not a binary thing. I'll get like both sides telling me I'm a piece of crap.
Right. Yeah. It depends on what it is. If I'm saying, I'm sure, like if Punk, if the story with his dog is true, like if his dog did get hurt, that would have set me off, if my dog got hurt. And then you put something like that out, and then you get people saying, oh, you hate the Elite, yada, yada, yada. Then you say Punk should apologize for the scrum. Then you get the Punk fans being like, oh, just shut your mouth, you're a clown, all that stuff. So
it's insane that it's like, it's easy to say that some of these people don't live in real life, but all of these people live in real life. Like behind every Twitter account is a human being, and all these human beings live real life. But it's almost as if they get lost in the fantasy of behind the scenes wrestling, the way they do in the fantasy of pro wrestling, and they're unable to kind of get out of that fan mentality. Is that
right?
Kind of what you think?
Exactly. Yeah. And nuance is just something that's just getting lost a lot. I feel like in general, right. It has to be all or nothing. You can't say Succession was great, but there was this one part I didn't like, and then people will jump on you for that.
How dare you hate Succession?
Right. Or one episode you didn't think was as good as the others. The fans, and it might have always been like this, but now that since there's a platform for it, it's out so much more. But it's all or nothing with so many people.
Hey, speaking of Succession, and honestly, Raj and I kind of connected more over television at first than we did wrestling. And if you haven't watched the finale yet, go ahead and fast forward just a few. Because Raj, you saw the finale?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah.
Can I say that you asked me what my prediction was about the ending, and I said it would end up being Tom, Chiffon, and Greg.
Mm-hmm.
I think
you called it.
I think I may have nailed it. What do you think?
You nailed it. You got it. Yeah, that was
what terrible human beings they all are, aren't they? Every single one of them is just a piece of crap.
I loved it. I loved how it was done. The awkward way they were holding hands at the end. It was. I thought that show just ended perfect with how the characters were. There are no good guys. By the end, I was kind of rooting for Kendall a little bit. I felt really bad for him, but by the end, it made you realize like you should not be rooting for him, and just reminded you why.
And it was a complete throwback and callback to the first episode. The first Kendall gets screwed over by a sibling, changing their vote at the last second. And it happened again, And so I thought it was like a perfect little bookend. Like you said on Twitter today, it is something that for the first season, you got to power through a little bit. But after that, once you get to know the characters, it is one of the best character pieces in the history of television.
Absolutely. And, a lot of shows are like that, where that first season where they're trying to over-explain the characters. And so a lot of the dialogue won't sound natural. Like, if like Tony Soprano's talking to Janice, he's like, well, my sister of 31 years, blah, blah, over-explaining. It's not like natural dialogue until...
all exposition, yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of that in the first season of Succession. But once it gets going, it's one of the great shows of all time. It's on my Mount Rushmore of dramas. And then, granted, I still haven't finished The Wire, and there's others that I haven't seen, but it's definitely there with Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, and Game of Thrones for me.
If you like those shows, once you finish The Wire, it'll be up there too. And and that's our TV segment. Hopefully, Raj and I will get back together to talk about Peacemaker or Cobra Kai.
Yeah,
those come back on. But as far as wrestling goes, one thing I want to talk about was All Elite Wrestling. All Elite Wrestling is a company, like I'm not giving background, by the way, in case you're wondering. I'm saying something else. But All Elite Wrestling is a company that to a lot of us, we were waiting for a long time. And when I say we were waiting for, there was pretty much unanimous kind of thought in the wrestling fan community that, man, WWE needs some competition. It needs, when is competition going to come along? Let's try to get behind, it's not TNA, and let's try to get behind this. It's not that. But All Elite Wrestling finally got billionaire backing, television. Been waiting for this a long time. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of All Elite Wrestling, were you one of those that was just kind of dying during the days that, WWE was unopposed and just praying and hoping there would be competition so we could see a better quality of product?
Absolutely, 100%. I think AEW is the best thing that has happened to pro wrestling, in this century. We saw flashes of it with TNA where it looked like they might start getting some momentum, but it just never caught on. I was dying for something like AEW where you have a real competitor, not just, something small that's not really in the same conversation. So I hate to use this, but I was all in when I heard about it. And
and for me, seeing them, and I don't know if were you at All In?
With all the pay-per-views, I go up until the day of the show, and then I get back home, and because I need to be at Mission Control, and so I was at All In until the day of the show. So
you were like hanging out at StarCast at the hotel and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah, I went to the weigh-ins and stuff like that.
When people say, I'm against, All Elite Wrestling, my music was played at the damn weigh-in. So I'm just saying, I've been there from the beginning. Yeah. And that scene at StarCast where all the fans, every time Cody walked in the room, were saying, thank you, Cody. And this not only this idea that WWE finally has a competition or that something special is going on, but also this kind of homegrown fan. A lot of new fans coming in. We can say it. Marty Scurll was part of that, bringing in new fans. There's a lot of people dressing up like him. The Elite bringing in newer fans. It seemed like All Elite Wrestling was going to be the thing. And as, I know Meltzer and people like that say, I root for all wrestling. I work for WWE. But for me, I was really rooting for All Elite Wrestling. Were you kind of the same way?
Absolutely. Still am.
And so when we do have critiques, and we do, about All Elite Wrestling, there seems to be a couple blowbacks. Number one from the fans, and number one from All Elite Wrestling. Like, I've noticed, and it pissed me off, and that's why I tweeted about it yesterday, is that all the stuff that people were saying by DMs and by texts and also conversations, they don't say publicly about All Elite Wrestling. If you agree with that, why do you think people in the media, fans, are kind of quote unquote afraid or resistant to criticizing All Elite Wrestling publicly?
Yeah, that's it's interesting because you don't see the same kind of criticism for AEW that you will with WWE, and I've criticized both. In my opinion, fairly forever. I mean, there was a time when I said WWE needs a complete creative overhaul. And this wasn't that long ago. I tweeted it like maybe whatever year it was they did that swamp match and the eye extraction match. But I was like, this is just going off the rails. It just completely sucks. Now it's unwatchable. I'm watching it because I have to. And, WWE fans, I just hear it all the time. I used to have this Back to the Future meme because they would repeat matches over and over. And so it was that, I've seen this before meme, and, WWE be like, oh, you're an AEW mark, you're an AEW shill. Why are you even watching this? And then, there was a time when I thought AEW was doing a lot of things really, really well. I thought, and I still think they're doing a lot of things really, really well, but there's a lot of things I think they're not doing as well. And just pointing those out, it's a different level when you criticize AEW as opposed to WWE. WWE, you definitely get the people, you definitely get people hating on it. But with AEW, people take it like you're just complete sellout, enemy. You work for the other company. It's that kind of backlash that you get.
But as far as the company itself, like I'm gonna say this. We always say things like this, but not that you're saying anything about All Elite Wrestling, but
right.
Because why do we feel the need to say that? Like with WWE, we don't feel the need to say that. With All Elite Wrestling, we feel the need to say, as far as the company goes. And my theory, maybe not a theory, is that All Elite Wrestling got a reputation, the company, not the fans, of being very sensitive, and also maybe showing that sensitivity in certain ways, like maybe not allowing certain talent to do interviews, maybe shutting people out like right away, especially at the very beginning. If you criticized them, you were shut out. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Yeah. I mean, and you hear from when I criticize WWE, I would not hear from top executives, from the company.
Yeah.
With AEW, every now and then I will. And over like minor things, but it's they definitely take criticism way more to heart, which is also a good thing in a way that they're listening, but they get super defensive. There was just a couple months ago when they announced Vikingo versus Kenny Omega, and look, I was excited about it, but I was like, geez, how much of your audience probably is not familiar with Vikingo? Like, why not?
That's some pretty valid criticism.
I'm like, if this is a dream match, obviously I don't think every match needs a build or anything like that. But if this is something you think your fan base is going to see as a dream match, why not announce it on Dynamite, do a little video package for Vikingo? And Conan has agreed with me. He's like, yeah, they should have built it up. And then do the match. And, geez, I was the next day I woke up and it had just exploded, and it was both ways, like people praising it, people criticizing it, wrestlers tweeting about it. It's just one of those things that shouldn't be controversial. It's look, the match did well. But don't tell me it would have done worse if they did some build for it.
Wrestling match,
Yeah.
But like hypothetically, and since one of the arguments I heard against that was, well, you don't know if it's a one-off. Well, apparently it wasn't a one-off, people. So, but let's say, I'm not a booker, but I've watched wrestling a long time. Let's say 3 weeks before the match, there was a shadow with a face of him and go, he's coming. And the next week they announce Vikingo is coming against Matt Sydal. And the next week he beats Matt Sydal. And the next week they say, we get our super match, Kenny Omega versus Vikingo. Like, what is the downside in that?
Yeah, and so that was one of the things I heard from some AEW executives over that tweet, and they were like, well, we didn't know on the last Dynamite, we didn't find out till later, and it's a one-off. So I was like, all right, fair enough. If you needed to do it, that fair enough. And then it turns out, he's been at other tapings since then,
on
doing ROH,
and Ring of Honor, and and that's another problem with All Elite Wrestling. Sometimes that impatience, like he's going to wrestle there eventually. So like, if this is the only time we can get him, why announce? What is the upside in announcing this match on social media after Rampage, and really relying on Twitter as your main promotion tool, and also your main awareness tool as well when it comes to Vikingo? Like, is there any upside to that at all?
Yeah, and so that was my whole point was announce it on Dynamite, give it so people know. Show a little video of Vikingo for the people who aren't aware of who he is.
Just a little video showing what he could do.
Yes.
would have done wonders. So let's talk about All Elite Wrestling. All Elite Wrestling had Double or Nothing. If you guys want to hear Raj and I's, and of course the lovely Issa, we did a post show on Wrestling Inc. If you want to hear our thoughts on that, match by match by match, do not hold me accountable for anything I said on that show. I don't know what was going on with me that night, but All Elite Wrestling, like, you wanted to succeed, you said. You said you were waiting for WWE to have competition. You said that All Elite Wrestling is the best thing to happen to wrestling in this century. So I think it's fair if you were to say, hey, here's some things that All Elite Wrestling could do to improve. Now, not improve for Raj Giri, the watcher of wrestling, but improve as far as Raj Giri, the watcher of ratings, and Raj Giri, the observer of ticket sales, and Raj Giri, the Wrestling Inc. Founder, who is very astute when it comes to knowing what's hot, what's not hot. What could All Elite Wrestling do in your mind to improve its popularity and set themselves up as a businessman in a better position in the marketplace?
Gosh, I think they have a great, a very great hardcore fan base, and you don't want to do anything that turns them off. You don't want to start becoming more like WWE. You want to be the alternative. So I'm all for that. But I also think, they'll start getting a star that's hot and they get cooled off almost, immediately or pretty soon after. And it happens time and time again. And again, that's something you bring up on social media. They're like, well, WWE did it with this guy. I'm like, I'm not talking about WWE. I'm talking about AEW and needing to create stars. You had Wardlow, who was white hot last year, like just really felt like he was going to be something big and just cooled off. Ricky Starks cut this amazing promo on MJF. It looked like he got some steam. And then again, he got kind of cooled off. The Acclaimed were super hot, kind of cooled off. So
FTR.
I think, yeah, FTR, absolutely. It just seems like they'll catch lightning in a bottle, and instead of running with it, they stick to their original plans. And, you look at this last pay-per-view, the main event, which was a really good match, and not the main event technically, but the world title match. But Jungle Boy is probably less over now than he was before that match was announced. I don't think anyone was really elevated from that feud. And if you went with the stars that were hot, like a Ricky Starks and a Wardlow, as opposed to sticking with your plan because you feel like you need to, I think it would just be different, because you are seeing the ratings slide. You're seeing the big drops year over year, double digits, in the 18 to 49 demo.
Huge. You and I a year ago were on Twitter, both of us, not coordinated, by the way, but we both made the same arguments. We were like, AEW sucks. And we're both like, look at the year to year, pal. Look at the year to year. The year to year is great. We're good. As long as you're increasing, and even if it's a slow growth, that's a good growth because it's a more permanent growth. But now we're looking at drops year to year, right?
Yeah, and then you're seeing, obviously Wembley's a huge success, and I knew it would be. There's a lot of people that are like, you could not have guessed how well it would do. And I was like, you can look on my Twitter account. I guess over 68,000 before tickets went on sale, because AEW, they do really well going to a market for the first time. And
they kill in New
They
Orleans.
Overperform.
They absolutely. That's
for special
been their
stuff.
thing from day one. I was at the Dynamite, the first Dynamite at MCI Center. Like that's what they do. They go to a new market and they kill. And there's no newer market than outside the North America. Like that's
right.
The market.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is you also had some journalists who were trying to act like this was the new norm, as opposed to tempering people and be like, look, this is what they do for new shows. The fans really come out in droves for it. Because then when you try to make it sound like they're going to be doing this over and over, when the CM Punk at All Out, when that did up 200,000 buys, instead of curbing that and making it sound like that's the new norm, then that gives fodder for other people when the next pay-per-view doesn't do as well. Be like, oh, now they're failing. They did this last time. And I really like to put all the nuance right off the bat. Like if this pay-per-view that we just saw, instead of making excuses for why the number isn't as good as the other pay-per-views. It's being like, look, this was a card that people didn't want to necessarily want to come out in droves. It's going to do its core buys. It's probably going to do 120,000, I think. But it's the lowest is in the Punk era, the Punk and post-Punk era. And so it's best to look at that, study that, and see what can be changed so that doesn't happen again.
Because what you're saying is, and I've seen it with, and I hate, like, I really respect Dave Meltzer. I do like what he's done in the industry. And if I saw him, I'd try to shake his hand and say hi. Like, I don't dislike him. But
yeah. I'm a fan.
Him and people who follow him, when they see Wembley and they go, you see, look, All Elite Wrestling, they're killing it right now. And they don't understand that you can live in a world where the ratings go down because the product isn't compelling. Vegas can't sell out because the product's not as compelling. And Wembley can sell out. Like, all those things could coexist. That's the nuance you're talking about. And it's Wembley doing 68,000 is more of a testament to All Elite Wrestling existing than it is All Elite Wrestling killing it right now, right?
Yeah, and kind of to that point with ratings too. We kind of saw the same thing where there was talk about how AEW Dynamite might overtake Raw in the demo. And when you put that stuff out there, you get people picking it up, and then it turns into, and when it doesn't happen, they just use that as fodder, And again, as opposed to from the beginning being like, look, they're doing hot right now. Punk just came in, Danielson just came in. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
And so it's just really tempering, really analyzing the numbers. There was a point last year where I was like, and again, I'm a big fan of Dave Meltzer. I've been reading The Observer forever, but where he would be like, Bischoff's an idiot because he's talking about how AEW has leveled off, but look at their year-to-year numbers. And I would point out on Twitter, I'm like, a year ago, they had NXT competition head-to-head, and their numbers went up drastically once NXT moved nights. Once we start comparing year-to-year numbers when NXT isn't in the equation, they're down. And then as soon as the week, when NXT, the first week where you're comparing year-over-year numbers to when they didn't have NXT competition, they're down. And right. I was saying that from the beginning. And, again, people were running with, no, they're up. Bischoff doesn't know what he's talking about, yada, yada, yada. And just like, no, do a realistic analysis of the number. Take NXT out. Look at what they've been doing the last 4 months, and you'll see that they're cooling off a bit.
And that's concerning because they've been growing. And they've got a new TV deal. They've got Wembley coming up. They've got Forbidden Door coming out. They've got All Out coming up. They've got Collision coming. Mm-hmm. So this summer could be the most crucial summer in the history of All Elite Wrestling. Like, it's either going to amplify all these issues and be a total mess, or they're going to get it together and really use this summer as a platform for bigger and greater things. Doing things the way they're doing now, which way do you think is going to happen, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, so this was another thing I got criticized for, but I was saying Collision really needs CM Punk right now because that show is really important, and just splitting up the rosters right now, I don't think is going to have that effect because you're already seeing the TV product cooling off, and doing a split on top of that where you have half the stars, you really need something big. And right now, the only thing that they have, because Goldberg is not going to be there every week, so the only thing you really have is Punk to give that show a boost, because you need that show to get off the ground, because they haven't signed a new TV deal, according to Tony Khan. And so you want this show to be as successful as possible. And to do that, having Punk on gets it off the ground. If you don't get it off the ground, if it becomes Rampage quickly, you're doomed. And not doomed in the sense like they'd get canceled or anything like that, but you want to make as much money as possible with this next TV deal. And I'm fairly confident that Warner Brothers would want to keep them on for sure, but how much are they going to spend is are they going to have? Is AEW going to have other bidders? They have Dynamite does really good rating, even though they've fallen. Their ratings are still really good. The other Rampage isn't. Battle of the Belts is insignificant. Dark Elevation, their YouTube numbers dropped tremendously. So they haven't shown that they can bring on a new product and it'll do well. All Access did really bad rate. I wouldn't say really bad ratings, but I mean, it was doing what that slap fighting thing was doing. And this was after an AEW show, which is as good of a lead in as you could have for an AEW All Access.
So the reality show did worse than the slap fighting?
Yeah, it was basically almost exactly the same every week. They were doing I want to say 0.009, maybe lower than that. I saw potential in the reality show, but the reality show was a problem in that people knew right away it wasn't a reality show because and of course no reality shows are reality shows, but when you have like the Bucks coming back and going, we got suspended, but you can't talk about why, right?
That's not really what people want. Like you're literally telling people we're pulling back the curtain, but we're not on the show.
Right. And that could have been super compelling. I look at a lot of these reality shows that they're doing right now. They had one, what is the name? It was on Netflix for golf, like swing, something swing. But every episode like showcased a different golfer and you went behind the scenes and that is something.
They had an IndyCar one like that on Netflix as well that did really well.
Yeah, what's the formula?
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was a gigantic hit, and that got the league a huge TV deal. So, it's something like that where you can use that to try to bring in new fans. And
these
instead,
are super interesting people. Where if you actually did that, it would work. I want to talk a little about the Collision. You and I disagree on this. I think as far as brand split, but I think it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about with people cooling off, right? Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that people are cooling off is because there's certain people that have to get their TV time. You got to get Jericho on there. You got to get now, and I think it's a good idea, Orange Cassidy on there. You got to get the Elite on there. You got to get the BCC on there. And so when people get, there's almost a rotation of other acts you can get on. But if you go to Collision and you start with a baseline, let's say 600,000, but you provide compelling television with these new stars, Swerve, Keith Lee, Ricky Starks, The Acclaimed, FTR being there and creating compelling television without dropping off, coming back on. I really do think they have the stars to do that, if even without CM Punk. And a brand split is almost the only way to make that happen, because otherwise we're going to be seeing the same thing we're seeing now, but at a bigger level. Where are you at on maybe the brand split actually working and using a way to grow the product as opposed to a way of doing things the way they're doing it?
I agree with you 100%. I think it's a great opportunity to start building new talent. My thing is just to get it off the ground. You need that star power. You need that buzz coming in just from a numbers perspective. And because we saw what the attendance was looking like for these first Collision shows, and that's on a Saturday night. So I just feel like you need that buzz to get those numbers up, so you're not playing in front of dead crowds. And that's where I'm saying you need a star like a CM Punk to really get the show off the ground. But I agree 100%. I think a roster split's a great idea because they do have so many people. Now, I think Tony Khan should give up the reins on one of the shows and make it complete, really try new things out that you're not doing on one show as opposed to the other. That was one complaint I always have with Raw and SmackDown is they're basically the same show, but one has red ropes, one has blue, as opposed to trying new things on one, and doing different things on the other and giving them different looks and feels and maybe making one edgier and one more family friendly. But I'd like to see that. I'd like to see guys like Swerve. I was saying the other night, how in the hell have Swerve and Keith Lee still not had that singles match? And
why not just keep them as a tag team if they weren't going to do it?
Right? Why did they? Yeah, exactly.
Why turn Swerve into this finger breaking psycho? Instead of just having him do these great promos and have Keith Lee and Swerve just destroying on Rampage every week, it would have been, and there's still opportunity with Rampage. Like we write off Rampage, there's still opportunity with Rampage. There's still opportunity with Battle of the Belts. It's just like there's not enough Tony Khan to go around, right?
Yeah, yeah, and he's dealing with a billion different things, and I do think when he took over creative, so I was critical of some of that AEW creative early on. The stuff with the Dark Order.
In your defense, it was terrible.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty. There was some stuff they did great. Like I thought Cody's storylines were always really good. MJF, I thought his stuff was good, but there was some stuff that was really bad. And once Tony Khan took over creative, I saw the quality improve. But now
tightened up a bit. It definitely tightened up for sure.
Yeah. But now you're just seeing like he can't focus on everything all the time, and so he could use help in that area. And granted, he has hired Will Washington. I think he does understand that. But I'd like to see two different creative teams on the two different shows and have real competition between the creative teams. Because I think that's how you could really get it going. But I do think Collision does need just that star power initially, and they don't have enough, in my opinion, for two high rated shows right now without Punk.
Without Punk. And I mean, Will Washington is someone who, first of all, just in canon, I don't know him, right? I've never met him. But like in canon, he appears to be the best human being in the world. Like when MJF threw the drink on the kid, Will Washington was not associated with All Elite Wrestling. He went, and I probably would have done the same thing, quite honestly, because I'm a kid guy. He went to comfort that kid. Everything I hear about him is a family guy, and there's some stories about things that he was persevered and gone over through, and also a very smart guy. So I'm all for Will Washington working there. I think he's a great hire, and I think it serves him well to hire someone like that from outside. But just something that hit me, one thing about WWE that doesn't work is Vince McMahon's tendency to hire people like Bruce who are really good at just, making sure that person's vision gets realized. What people would maybe inaccurately call a yes man. I like Bruce. I worked with Bruce. I like Bruce, and I hate him called a yes man, but a lot of people think there's a lot of yes men. Is that maybe a problem with All Elite Wrestling? There's not enough people now, since he tightened up, who are not yes men to Tony Khan, or is that completely inaccurate?
Gosh, I don't know. That's kind of a tough one to answer, but yeah, I do think you have people that aren't pushing back on stuff. But I'm sure Tony's. But I can't say that for sure. So I don't know. I know QT Marshall and there's some other guys that are in creative. I don't know how much pushback they give but I do think the storyline seemed better crafted when Cody was there. And it feels like a lot of the long-term storytelling has not been as compelling since his departure. And I feel like you kind of see that with the pay-per-view numbers. Everyone has been going down and down and down from the one before. And I think a lot of that is just with the storytelling. They go to the well too. They do the same things too often. With the MJF saying you have to beat 3 guys in order to face me, and as opposed to trying something completely different. And again, maybe they did with this pillars thing, but I don't think that worked.
No, and you said Cody. I put it up to Twitter a while ago. What was worse for All Elite Wrestling, the brawl out or losing Cody? And people are like, well, Cody would never have been that guy in All Elite Wrestling. And I'm like, no, he was there. Like, they had him. Like, look at Cody now. I went to a wrestling event, WWE event, a week and a week ago, and Cody signed autographs for an hour afterwards. He was the most popular guy. They had that guy, and they decided not to use that guy like that. How big a deal do you think it is, looking at what Cody's doing now and what his potential was? Well, by the way, he surely knew that. How do you think? Are people kind of sleeping on the fact that that guy that we see there could have been there? He could have been in All Elite Wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think people underestimate how much he meant. And to your point, not just as a talent, but in all respects. Again, I mentioned like just overall storylines have not been as compelling since he left. Yeah, I think it was the biggest loss for promotions. Gosh, I'm trying to think since when. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely by far their biggest loss. And it was kind of the word the phrase game changer, I think, is used too often, but it was close to that,
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to wrap up pretty soon with you, Raj. I just want to ask you a couple questions before you go, if you don't mind. Do you have time for a couple more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so first of all this talk about, these micro-analysis of numbers and stuff, there was an argument put forth to me, and I'm not going to say by who, that the elite, the fact that the elite might not necessarily be moving numbers is indicative of something that was called to me the Cena phenomenon, where when John Cena was when WWE was falling, but the only thing that was metrically good was Cena. And so now some people think that that AEW is falling, but the only thing that's metrically good is Omega and the Elite. Where are you on that? Like, if the show is falling as a whole, shouldn't they look at the whole show as a whole and look at the things at the top? Or should they keep going, well, we have a person with a high batting average on a losing team, so let's give him more at bats, and that's the deal?
Yeah, I know Tony does pay close attention to the numbers, and you do got to look at the show overall as a whole, in my opinion. But you also do want to see who your difference makers are, and Omega is definitely one of them. I don't think the Young Bucks are as much. When you put Young Bucks and Omega in that in those trios matches, it did nothing for numbers. But you put Omega in a singles match, it does. It makes a difference.
I think it was presented to me as Omega, not the Elite. Actually, now that I think about it, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So Omega, I'd say Omega is probably, you take Punk out of the equation, he's probably their biggest draw right now. Someone I've been a little disappointed with has been Adam Cole. I love Adam Cole. I think he's fantastic promo and everything. But his numbers, when I look at the numbers that he's doing, his quarters and everything are just not doing well. And All Access has kind of built a lot around his return, and that didn't do well. And then, we had this pay-per-view. So, and I think that's the direction they're going with next with MJF, is MJF and Adam Cole. And I think MJF needs a big draw. And that's where I think Kenny Omega would be the right one for him next.
Absolutely. Hey, Raj, so that was my last question as far as this kind of stuff goes. Real quick, though, you said you're a wrestling fan, such a wrestling fan that on a random weekend in the 90s, you decided to start a wrestling website. Not the first time you watched wrestling, but what hooked you on wrestling? What got you in? Most of us kind of started when we were younger, and we saw something and we said, well, I guess this is my thing now. So what hooked you on wrestling?
The Hogan Andre story. I was at a friend's house for a Saturday night's main event. Hogan wrestled King Kong Bundy, beat him, and then Andre just choked the hell out of him after the match. And all these wrestlers came in. I was just terrified of Andre. And I knew before that wrestling was a work. And so I was always kind of interested in seeing if I could tell where where they're holding back and things like that. So even though I knew it was work, I just got sucked in, and I was scared to death of Andre, and just, went to my TV listings to find out when wrestling was on. And I was hooked ever since. And then, went back and watched all the stuff leading to WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 4. We didn't have pay-per-view where I lived, but we knew someone. My dad's friend had a satellite dish, so he recorded it, gave it to us afterwards. I stayed up late.
You are so old.
I know. It is nuts how old I am.
How big was the satellite dish?
Oh gosh, it was like, huge, like a TV company.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it was nuts, but I loved it.
So Hogan Andre got you in, and I got in a little bit before that. Maybe like WrestleMania 1 era is kind of when I came in, which is pretty. It was pretty impossible to resist. So as far as wrestling now, you and I are known for like pointing out things we don't like not because we're old and crotchety, but just because we want it to be successful. Like there are people that put out criticism of wrestling because they want it to be the way it was when they were younger. And I don't think you and I do that at all. I think we do it, we're kind of interested in wrestling for the same reasons. We want it to be successful. We want it to be good. We want it to be fun. What is the most fun thing, good thing in wrestling right now for you?
I thought the Bloodline storyline was pretty fantastic. And, again, that's where I come to with stories and characters, and the way they did that build and that story, I thought was one of the best things I've seen in wrestling in a long time. And I thought that showed even just this past Saturday at Night of Champions, the way they did that main event match, and with that crowd and with Sami Zayn and then the Jimmy Uso turn. I thought it was all just great. And so I didn't care about the moves in that match, and it was the story and the presentation, the story in the Cody Brock match. I didn't care how many kickouts or anything there were. The story in that match just drew me in. And when wrestling tells those stories, it's my favorite thing in the world.
And to me, that's something that is so important. Every time I tweet this, and I tweet it often, about wrestling isn't about the show, it's about caring who wins and loses. You always agree with that. The fact that stories make it. And, we always talk about, like Cody, says these antiquated notions of heel and babyface or whatever. But you don't watch the Avengers looking for a good fight.
Right.
You watch the Avengers because you don't want Spider-Man to die, right?
Yep, exactly. It's always, you could have a superhero movie like Black Adam and have all the explosions and the CGI and everything. But if you don't have a good story, it's not going to work. And that applies to wrestling too, in my opinion. Even though there is a section out there, and enough of a section, that a promotion can do just moves, and it's going to do, you can create an audience with that. But to be a mainstream company, you definitely have to have those stories. And AEW has done it really well in the past as well. There's nothing right now that I'd say I'm hooked on storyline wise, but they've told some good stories in the past for sure.
Well, you've told a really good story, gone from weekend website warrior to now retired, semi-retired curmudgeon, Raj Giri. Dude, thanks for joining us. I guess we might end up doing some more stuff at Wrestling Inc. down the road. I really had a good time this last time, and I really want to thank you for coming on Wrestling Friends. What you got to plug, Raj? You got a like a wine company yet? What are you doing?
You can follow me on Twitter at the Raj Giri. Gosh, yeah, I've done a lot of investing over the years. Me and Jack Farmer, we've done some just basic investment videos, just nothing, super complicated or anything. Just like where to find the best savings accounts, or how to get, where the best way to get money back on your credit cards, things like that. So you can check that out at Practical Money. So it's youtube.com/@practicalmoney. And I really appreciate you having me on. This was really fun.
Yeah, definitely. And you guys might want to check that out. Raj is very good with money and has made a lot of investments. That's why he has the Kerry Lake filter on, so you don't see his palatial estate behind him. Raj, thanks a lot for joining us, and we will talk soon, okay?
All right, take care.
Well, that was Raj Giri. I still don't know why so many people hate him. People take things he says and take them out of context, or take one thing he says and make it a big deal, or take another thing he says and say it's something else. I saw that on Twitter a lot. People are like, he said this, what a terrible thing. It's like, he didn't say that. He said this, what a terrible thing. He didn't say that. And I looked at the thing that they said he said, and I was like, well, it's nothing like any case what they're saying it is. Like, just when you're on the radio or you're on podcasts hours and hours for thousands of hours, you're going to say some stuff. I did the other day on Wrestling Inc. some stuff. I'm like, well, but nothing that belies anything but a good character for Raj. He's a great guy. and he's a success in business. And I find a lot of these people that comment on people like Raj, or even comment on myself, who just, like I said, I posted, hey, we're gonna have a show with Raj Giri, and someone's like, no one cares what you do, you fat fuck. Like those people, I'm so thankful for them, because it shows me that, before it used to be like this thing where it was like, if you don't have haters, then you're not on the right track or whatever the hell, right? But then I got a real perspective on it. I'm like, well, there's people who are doing stuff and there's people who are not doing stuff. Raj is someone who's doing stuff. I'm someone who sometimes is doing stuff. And whenever there's someone doing stuff, if you're one of those people out there who's always doing stuff, right? There's always someone who's sitting in the corner watching, going, it should have been me. And they're nitpicking everything. Like, I can't believe you're doing that. I can't believe you're doing this. That should have been me. I should be in there. But I'm not so sure they don't have what it takes, but they won't do what it takes to get there. And they're very comfortable in that corner. And that's most of the people that hate on people. So if you get hate from people, just know you should be thankful for them, because they ain't got what it takes to do what you do. They won't do what it takes to do what you do. And they'd rather sit in the corner and say, it should have been me. It should have been me. Now, to the subject, before we get to CM Punk, to the subject of can you criticize All Elite Wrestling? The answer apparently is no, because Elite Wrestling is so, and I know I talked about it earlier, but I want to just kind of recap it with what Raj said. To me, Elite Wrestling, the company, is so calloused from hearing just crazy, stupid hate for so long that they kind of label it all like that, right? They label it all as just this hating stuff, and then they react in ways that's sensitive, that doesn't foster more feedback, I guess is fair to say. And then the fans themselves, anytime you tweet anything negative about All Elite Wrestling, someone called me a Triple H ass kisser. Triple H ass kisser? What? And that's just because I asked some questions. So if we want All Elite Wrestling to be what we want it to be, and this has been very AEW heavy today, sorry about that, and we want it to succeed, which I think all wrestling fans should, because if All Elite Wrestling succeeds, everything succeeds. It's good for wrestlers, it's good for fans, it's good for everybody. And we should probably speak up when things are going a little south, because we don't want things to continue to go south. And things are going a little south right now. Now, it's not the way it was, and the opportunity is there. The opportunity is there. With Collision, with Dynamite, I keep repeating myself, I'm very sorry. Let's talk about CM Punk. It was announced by Tony Khan that CM Punk was going to be part of Collision, the first episode of Collision. And, the funniest thing on Twitter was that a lot of people just kind of reacted to the boos and the yays. Like, I heard mostly boos, or I heard mostly yays. I got to say, I heard them all yays and a chant. That's what I heard. I heard some low rumbling maybe, but I didn't hear any boos. And so someone who was in the building texted me and said, or DM'd me and said, in the building, there was no boos at all. What are people talking about? So I think it's a bit of remember that white dress or yellow dress, purple dress situation a while ago? I think it's like a Rorschach test like that, where you see what you want to see. So maybe I'm seeing what I want to see. But as far as the announcement itself, awesome. I'm not this giant CM Punk fan, right? I'm not this guy who's like, CM Punk. But I'm a guy who likes him, who always followed him, my son's favorite wrestler. And he was very nice to my son, which buys you a lot of points in my book. And also someone that I saw treated very unfairly, compared to others in a situation, and where the public narrative was pushed against him. Did CM Punk deserve some of that stuff? Maybe. I don't know. I never got a chance to find out, because the press, and I'm talking about certain people in the press, certainly not the more, unbiased people like the people at Fightful, but, some of my friends at the aggregators, but certainly the guys over the Observer, where every time something good about CM Punk came out, something negative came out. My prediction is something negative is going to come out about CM Punk this week. Something we didn't know before that we're going to find out now, and it's going to paint him in a bad light, because that's what always happens. I hope it doesn't. But All Elite Wrestling needs CM Punk. They need him to get to that next level. Ideally, they would need him to wrestle Kenny Omega and have the Bucks wrestle FTR. We know that's not going to happen. And we also I believe that it's not to do with CM Punk. But CM Punk is there. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be at these events. He's going to bring the ratings up. Chicago's going to be lit. And it is a great thing for All Elite Wrestling. Hopefully he takes the lead on being part of the brand split. And All Elite Wrestling makes the changes they need to make to make it the best company in the world. And WWE steps up the way they did earlier this year. And wrestling fans will rejoice. And I will rejoice with you. Because we are wrestling friends, and you have been listening. This was going to be such a good close. This is going to be so good, and I screwed up. Like, it doesn't matter how good your joke is. If you have a typo in it, it doesn't matter, or you stutter in it, doesn't matter. So, maybe I'll just pretend that didn't happen and say something like, and that's great for wrestling fans, and it's great for wrestling friends. You and I, wrestling friends, we're deep in the episodes now. We're here. We're in it. We're in it together. Join us every single week. I got nothing else to plug except one thing. Thank you for listening. And please listen next week because you never know what we're going to do on Wrestling Friends with me, Matt Coon.